What if I told you that the smallest decisions you make each day, the ones that seem almost invisible, are actually shaping the destiny of your life? Not the big, dramatic moments, but the tiny choices. Whether you read a page, skip the gym, write a sentence, or eat that extra cookie. These aren't just random acts, they're habits, and they're quietly creating the person you're becoming. That's the power James Clear uncovers in Atomic Habits. The hook is simple but shocking. Success is not about massive change or superhuman willpower. It's about tiny, atomic-level habits. Changes so small they're easy to overlook, but when repeated consistently, they compound into extraordinary results. Just as atoms are the building blocks of matter, atomic habits are the building blocks of remarkable lives. Clear begins by reminding us that every habit is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. Each time you practice a habit, good or bad, you reinforce an identity. Skip the workout, and you vote for being inactive. Lace up your shoes and jog, and you vote for being healthy. No single action defines you, but collectively, your habits carve your destiny. This is why focusing only on goals can be misleading. Goals are about outcomes: losing 20 pounds, earning a promotion, saving a certain amount of money. But habits are about systems, the daily practices that lead you there. If you set a goal without building the right habits, you may achieve temporary success, but it won't last. Systems create lasting changes. Think of it this way: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Goals are the results you want, but systems are the processes that make them inevitable. Just like a farmer cannot force crops to grow by yelling at them, success can't be forced by wishing for it. You build the right environment, plant the right seeds, and tend to them consistently, and the results appear naturally. Clear illustrates this with the story of the British cycling team, which had been embarrassingly bad for over a century. Then came coach Dave Brailsford, who introduced the philosophy of marginal gains, the idea of improving everything by just 1%. They didn't just train harder. They redesigned bike seats for comfort, adjusted uniforms for aerodynamics, and improved diet, sleep, and even hand washing to avoid colds. None of these changes seemed monumental, but together they created unstoppable momentum. Within a few years, British cyclists were dominating the Olympics and Tour de France. That's the power of small habits compounding over time. The same principle applies to our lives. Habits compound, just like money compounds with interest. Reading a page today doesn't make you smarter immediately, but reading daily for years transforms your mind. Saving a small amount of money doesn't make you rich instantly, but consistent saving builds wealth. Neglect works the same way. Skipping a workout today won't ruin your health, but skipping daily leads to long-term decline. Success and failure are both the result of the compounding effect of habits. Clear makes one thing very clear. If you want to change your life, start by changing your habits. And to do that, you don't need motivation or massive willpower. What you need is to understand how habits are formed and how to design them to work in your favor. That's where the real journey begins. To truly master habits, James Clear explains, you need to understand how they're formed. Every habit, whether good or bad, follows the same cycle: cue, craving, response, and reward. This is the backbone of human behavior, the invisible pattern that drives everything from brushing your teeth to scrolling endlessly on your phone. It begins with a cue, a trigger that tells your brain to start a habit. This could be as simple as waking up in the morning, walking into the kitchen, or feeling stressed. The cue sparks a craving, an urge to change your internal state. You don't crave the cigarette itself, you crave the relief it brings. You don't crave scrolling social media, you crave distraction or connection. That craving leads to a response, the actual habit you perform. Finally, there's the reward, the satisfaction or relief you get that reinforces the cycle, teaching your brain to repeat it next time. Clear distills this into what he calls the 4 laws of behavior change, a practical framework to build good habits and break bad ones. Number 1, make it obvious. If you want to create a good habit, the first step is awareness. Many of our habits are so automatic we don't even notice them. By redesigning your environment to highlight good cues and hide bad ones, you make habits easier to start. Want to read more? Place a book on your pillow so it's the last thing you see at night. Want to eat healthier? Put fruit on the counter and hide the junk food. Environment often matters more than willpower. Number 2, make it attractive. Habits are more likely to stick if you enjoy them. This doesn't mean tricking yourself into loving push-ups. It means pairing habits with something pleasurable. Listen to your favorite podcast only when you exercise. Sip your favorite tea while journaling. The brain learns faster when rewards feel immediate and enjoyable. Number 3, make it easy. Complexity kills habits. The more steps or effort required, the less likely you'll follow through. Clear suggests the 2-minute rule. Scale down any habit to something that takes 2 minutes or less. Instead of committing to run 5 miles, commit to putting on my running shoes. Instead of write a book, commit to open my notebook. Once you start, momentum takes over. Habits are built on repetition, not intensity. Number 4, make it satisfying. Your brain is wired to repeat what feels good. That's why bad habits stick so well. They often give instant pleasure even if they're harmful later. To lock in good habits, find ways to make them satisfying. Track your progress with a habit tracker. Celebrate small wins or use visual cues like crossing off days on a calendar. The immediate sense of reward keeps you coming back. What's powerful is that these same 4 laws can be inverted to break bad habits. To stop a negative pattern, make it invisible or remove the cue. Make it unattractive or highlight the downsides. Make it difficult, add friction so it's harder to do. Make it unsatisfying or attach consequences. For example, if you're trying to stop wasting time on social media, you might delete the apps from your phone, remind yourself how drained it makes you feel, log out every time so you have to re-enter passwords, and tell a friend you'll pay them $10 if you scroll mindlessly again. By mastering this framework, you no longer rely on willpower alone. You design your habits. You become the architect of your behavior, not its victim. And as Clear says, you don't need radical change, you just need small, consistent improvements. This leads to one of the most powerful ideas in the book, the 1% rule. Improving by just 1% each day doesn't feel like much in the moment, but compounded over time, it makes you unrecognizably better. Likewise, getting 1% worse each day doesn't feel disastrous right away, but years later it adds up to decline. The direction of your habits matters far more than the size of your goals. And when you combine the science of behavior with the compounding power of small improvements, you begin to understand why habits, not motivation, are the real drivers of lasting success. But understanding is just the beginning. The real magic comes when you connect habits to something even deeper, your identity. If there's one idea that sets atomic habits apart, it's this: true behavior change is identity change. Most people focus on outcomes. I want to lose weight. I want to make more money. I want to read more. Some go a step deeper and focus on processes. I'll follow this diet. I'll stick to this budget. I'll set a reading plan. But Clear argues that the deepest and most lasting change happens at the identity level. I am a healthy person. I am disciplined with money. I am a reader. Why does this matter? Because every action you take is a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. When you cast enough votes, the identity becomes natural. If you read a page every day, you're no longer someone trying to read more. you're a reader. If you exercise consistently, you're no longer someone trying to get fit. You're an athlete in practice. The shift is subtle but powerful. Your habits stop being things you do and start becoming expressions of who you are. Clear explains that identity-based habits are more resilient than outcome-based habits. If your goal is simply to lose 20 pounds, once you reach that goal, the motivation fades and you might revert to old patterns. But if your identity is, "I am a healthy person," the habits stick because they're part of who you are. Goals can be temporary. Identity is enduring. He suggests a simple question to reframe your habits. Who is the type of person that could get the result I want? For example, instead of asking, "How do I become wealthy?" ask, "What would a financially responsible person do?" Then, start casting votes for that identity by doing what that type of person would do. Each small action reinforces the story you tell yourself. This is why habits are not just about external results, but about internal transformation. Even the smallest habits matter because they are evidence of the kind of person you're becoming. Writing one sentence proves you're a writer. Meditating for 1 minute proves you are someone who values mindfulness. Going for a short walk proves you are someone who prioritizes health. The scale of the action doesn't matter. The alignment with identity does. Clear emphasizes that the reverse is also true. Negative habits reinforce negative identities. Every time you say, "I can't resist junk food," or "I'm terrible with money," you're reinforcing an identity that chains you to mediocrity. To change your life, you must change the story you tell yourself. Habits are how you rewrite that story. To put this into practice, Clear recommends focusing less on what you want to achieve and more on who you want to become. Instead of obsessing over finishing a marathon, focus on becoming the kind of person who never misses a run. Instead of stressing about reading 50 books a year, focus on being the kind of person who reads every day. Identity makes habits sustainable because they're no longer external obligations, they're internal truths. This identity-based approach also explains why habits are so hard to change when they're tied to old beliefs. If you've told yourself for years, "I'm just not a morning person," waking up early feels like fighting against your identity. To change, you must begin telling yourself a new story. "I'm learning to become a morning person." At first, it feels unnatural, but every time you wake up earlier, you reinforce the new identity until it feels authentic. Identity, in the end, is the root of habits, and habits are the evidence of identity. They feed each other in a loop. This is why small changes matter so much. They are votes for the future self you want to embody. When you realize this, even the tiniest habit becomes meaningful. With identity as the foundation, Clear moves deeper into practical strategies for building better habits. He explores how to design your environment, use habit stacking, and build routines that naturally support your desired identity. Because if identity is who you want to be, your environment is the stage on which that identity comes alive. Once you understand that habits are votes for your identity, the next question becomes, how do you make those habits stick? James Clear insists that your environment is one of the most powerful forces shaping your behavior. While most people think they lack willpower, what they often lack is an environment designed for success. Your surroundings constantly send cues that trigger habits. If your living room has a TV in the center and books tucked away in a corner, you'll naturally watch more television than read. If cookies sit on the counter while fruits hide in the fridge, you'll reach for sugar instead of something healthy. Clear calls this the principle of choice architecture. By rearranging your environment, you can make good habits the default and bad habits harder to reach. This is why one of his most famous lines is, "You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." Systems are largely environmental. Want to play the guitar more? Place it in the middle of your room instead of in the closet. Want to watch less TV? Unplug it after each use or put the remote in another room. Small tweaks shift behavior without requiring endless discipline. But environment alone isn't enough. You also need strategy. That's where habit stacking comes in. Habit stacking is the practice of linking a new habit to an existing one, making it easier to remember and execute. Instead of trying to create a habit from scratch, you piggyback it on something you already do automatically. The formula is simple. After current habit, I will new habit. For example, after I brush my teeth, I will floss one tooth. After I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. After I take off my shoes, I will immediately change into workout clothes. By attaching new habits to existing routines, you create reliable triggers that guide your behavior. Over time, this stacking effect builds a strong chain of habits that flow together naturally, requiring less thought and effort. Clear also emphasizes the power of implementation intentions, being specific about when and where you'll perform a habit. Saying, "I'll exercise this week," is vague, and vague intentions rarely lead to action. But saying, "I'll go for a 20-minute run at 7 a.m. in the park," makes it real. When the cue arrives, the decision has already been made. All of these strategies reduce the friction of good habits and increase the friction of bad ones. Friction in this context is simply how easy or difficult something feels to do. If you make good habits obvious, attractive, and easy, they flow naturally. If you make bad habits invisible, unattractive, and hard, they gradually fade away. This is why he encourages you to view willpower as a temporary fix, not a long-term solution. Relying on motivation to fight against an environment that constantly tempts you is exhausting. But when you design an environment that naturally supports your desired habits, you don't have to fight, you just flow. Step by step, you realize that the people who seem most disciplined are often simply those who set up their lives in a way that makes discipline unnecessary. They don't resist temptation as much as they avoid being exposed to it in the first place. And when you combine the forces of identity, environment, and habit stacking, habits begin to feel less like a struggle and more like a natural part of who you are. Yet even with these strategies, many people struggle because progress feels too slow. That's where the power of compounding and the hidden plateau of latent potential come into play.
One of the greatest challenges with building habits is that progress often feels invisible. You go to the gym for weeks, but your body doesn't look much different. You meditate daily, but your mind still feels restless. You practice a skill, yet improvement seems painfully slow. This discouragement causes many people to quit too soon. James Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential. It's the quiet phase where effort accumulates beneath the surface, waiting to break through. Think of it like heating an ice cube. At 25 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing happens. At 28, 29, and 30 degrees, still nothing. But the moment you hit 32 degrees, the ice begins to melt. That doesn't mean the prior effort was wasted. It means all of it was building up to that breakthrough moment. Habits work the same way. Success is not a linear path, but a curve shaped by compound growth. Just as money multiplies through compound interest, habits compound through repeated actions. Reading one page may seem trivial, but over months it makes you well-read. Saving a few dollars each day feels insignificant, but over years it builds wealth. Eating a single unhealthy meal doesn't harm you, but repeated over time, it erodes health. Clear reminds us that what you do consistently matters more than what you do occasionally. The small things, repeated day after day, create a trajectory. Over time, that trajectory determines your destiny. This is why focusing on systems rather than goals is so powerful. Systems ensure you show up consistently, even when results are delayed. The plateau of latent potential teaches patience. Just because you can't see progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. Your work is not wasted, it is stored. Habits are like seeds planted in the ground. Nothing seems to be happening for weeks, but beneath the soil, roots are spreading. Then one day, the shoot breaks through and everyone else calls it an overnight success. But you know the truth. Success is rarely sudden. It's the result of silent, consistent effort compounding over time. This is why Clear encourages a shift in focus. Stop obsessing over immediate results and start trusting the process. If you show up every day, improvement is inevitable, even if invisible for a while. The moment of breakthrough will come, and when it does, it feels exponential, as if progress suddenly accelerates. But patience alone isn't enough. To stay consistent during the plateau, you need strategies to keep going when motivation fades. Clear emphasizes building habits so small and so easy that they don't require motivation at all. He circles back to the 2-minute rule. Make your habits so frictionless that doing them feels effortless. Success comes not from giant leaps, but from steady, unrelenting steps. This principle of compounding effort doesn't just build results, it reshapes your sense of identity. Each action, no matter how small, becomes evidence that reinforces the story you're writing about yourself. And when that story is aligned with your vision of who you want to be, the plateau is no longer discouraging. It becomes proof that you're on the right path. As you begin to trust this invisible growth, you also start to realize that bad habits compound just as powerfully in the opposite direction. This dual truth that habits are neutral tools of compounding, building you up or breaking you down, makes awareness essential. And awareness deepens when you measure and track your habits, turning the invisible into something visible.
Once you grasp the compounding nature of habits, the next challenge is making sure they actually stick. James Clear explains that what gets measured gets managed. When you track your habits, you create visible proof of your progress, which makes it harder to ignore the small wins that otherwise go unnoticed. Habit tracking can be as simple as crossing off a day on a calendar, keeping a journal, or using an app. The method doesn't matter. The key is the feedback. Every check mark or streak becomes a reward in itself, a little signal to your brain that says, yes, you're on track. This makes habits satisfying, which strengthens them. But Clear also warns against the all-or-nothing trap. Missing a habit once is not a disaster. Missing it twice in a row is where the danger lies. One skipped workout won't ruin your fitness, but letting it snowball into weeks of skipping will. His rule is simple: never miss twice. Even if you scale the habit down to its smallest version, like doing one push-up or reading one paragraph, showing up keeps the chain alive. Consistency beats intensity. Accountability is another powerful force. Left to ourselves, we often justify slipping back into old patterns. But when someone else is watching, our behavior sharpens. This is why elite performers, from athletes to CEOs, often rely on coaches, mentors, or peer groups. Knowing that you'll have to report your actions creates a social cost for failure and a social reward for success. One clever method Clear suggests is creating a habit contract, a written agreement outlining your commitments and consequences if you fail. For example, you might agree with a friend that if you skip your morning run, you'll pay them $20. The pain of losing money or disappointing someone else is a powerful motivator. By externalizing accountability, you make habits more durable. Clear also touches on the role of culture.
we tend to adopt habits that are normalized within our group. If your friends are health conscious, it feels natural to exercise and eat well. If your workplace values punctuality, you'll likely become more time conscious. By surrounding yourself with people who embody the habits you want, you absorb their behaviors almost automatically. As he puts it, one of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. This highlights a deeper truth. While habits are personal, they're also social. We don't just rise to the level of our intentions, we rise or fall to the expectations of our environment and our peers. Designing both your physical and social environments with care makes good habits inevitable and bad ones harder to sustain. But even with tracking, accountability, and supportive environments, setbacks will happen. Clear reminds us that perfection isn't the goal, persistence is. Success is less about never slipping and more about recovering quickly when you do. Habits, after all, are not a finish line, but a lifestyle. As habits take root, you begin to see how they shape not just your daily actions, but your entire trajectory in life. This is where Clear zooms out to explore the broader lessons, how habits compound into mastery, how they shape destiny, and why the tiniest actions often matter most in the long run.
As habits compound over time, their impact extends far beyond immediate results. James Clear emphasizes that mastery is not about radical breakthroughs, but about relentlessly refining the basics. Success in any field is often the result of small, repeated actions performed consistently over years. Think about top athletes, world-class musicians, or successful entrepreneurs. They aren't necessarily more talented than others, but they are more consistent in applying small disciplines. They embrace boredom, repeating the same drills, the same routines, and the same fundamentals long after the initial excitement fades. Clear points out that professionals stick to the schedule even when they don't feel motivated, while amateurs let their moods dictate their actions. This difference compounds into mastery. He also warns about the downside of good habits. They can lock you into autopilot. Once something becomes automatic, you risk coasting. Growth requires not just repeating habits, but also reflecting on them, tweaking, and continuously improving. Otherwise, what once served you may eventually limit you. True mastery comes from balancing consistency with conscious refinement. Another key lesson is the importance of focusing on trajectory over position. People often compare themselves to others based on current results, who is fitter, wealthier, or more successful right now. But what matters more is the direction you're moving in. A small but positive trajectory compounds into greatness, while even big current success can erode if built on weak habits. As Clear says, you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results. This perspective takes the pressure off instant outcomes and redirects it toward daily systems. Instead of obsessing over how far you have to go, you focus on getting 1% better each day. With time, those 1% improvements add up to transformations so massive that others call them extraordinary, even though they were built from ordinary steps. In the end, Atomic Habits is not just about hacking productivity or achieving goals. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally lives the life you want. Your habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. They quietly, invisibly, and relentlessly shape your identity, your future, and your destiny. And perhaps the most liberating message of the book is this: you don't need to change your entire life overnight. You just need to start small. Read one page, do one push-up, save $1. Each action is a vote for the person you want to become. Over time, those votes accumulate until the evidence is undeniable. You are no longer trying to change, you are changed.
Atomic habits may be small, but their power is immense. They remind us that greatness isn't reserved for a chosen few. It's available to anyone willing to align their daily actions with their deepest identity. And that is how ordinary habits create extraordinary results.
And that brings us to the end of Atomic Habits by James Clear. I hope this summary inspired you to see how the smallest decisions and daily habits, things that often feel insignificant, actually have the power to shape your identity, your future, and your success. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more actionable book summaries that can truly transform your mindset and your life. Your support helps us create more content that brings these life-changing ideas to you. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which habit are you going to start today? Is it related to health, productivity, learning, or personal growth? Let me know, and maybe we can inspire each other. Remember, progress doesn't have to be massive. Small habits, done consistently, compound into extraordinary results. Start today, no matter how tiny the action, and watch your life transform over time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next book summary.